What's up, friendly neighborhood nerds? If you want to hear interviews from industry pros, get first looks, and have access to endless comic content, wake up. Please wake up. You're in a coma. Your mother misses you.
What's up, friendly neighborhood nerds? This is Judah Rad. I'm here with Robo Strange, and today we have a very, very special guest. He's been with Image Comics since the beginning, going on, I think, like 20 years or something. President and COO of Top Cow since 1998. Matt has created and written over 30 new franchises for Top Cow and Image, including Think Tank, The Tithe, Necromancer, Vice, Lady Pendragon, Aphrodite 9, Tales of Honor, as well as handling the company's business affairs. Recently working on The Clock with legendary artist Colleen Duran. Matt, thank you so much for being here. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, you guys. It's been
sure.
a weird year, hasn't it?
Weird, yeah. Weird is a word for it. Sure.
Yeah.
Say that.
Yeah.
I think they should strike 2020 from the record, and I think next year should be 2020.
Right. Right.
It is weird, given the 2020 hindsight thing, sort of saying of it all. It's it is a little ironic almost and prescient. Make me wonder about our human race.
So Robo and I had a conversation about this, and we decided that from January to March of 2021, you can make the hindsight is 2020 joke, but after that, you have to stop.
Right.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
3 months.
Fair enough. That seems more than fair.
Okay, cool. So Matt, your career is cool. You've had front row seats to what I would say is an incredible journey that Image has taken over the years. What's it been like seeing this publisher evolve so much?
It's one word, surreal. It really is surreal, because when I started and got hired initially in 1993, I wasn't really into comics. I didn't know who these people were, and I didn't know who the characters were. When we talk about our origin stories and how we got into comics, when I reveal mine, often people get annoyed, because usually people are lifelong fans, and this is what they've always wanted to do, and I kind of back-assed into it, So it was never anything I intended to do or wanted to do, and I just kind of fell into it and fell in love with it. Now I can't imagine doing anything else. I really enjoy creating and writing and developing and collaborating with artists, but no, Rob Liefeld hired me in April of 1993. I was with him until early 97. I was at Image Central by myself from 97 to 98. In April of 98, Marc Silvestri hired me. I've been at Top Cow now for 22 years. It's been really odd. Early Image is kind of hard to explain to people, because those guys didn't feel like they were competing with Marvel and DC. They really felt like they were competing with each other.
Yeah.
So there felt like there was this strong unanimity between, Liefeld and McFarlane and Lee and all these guys. There was not. They had sort of a common bond in that they all sort of did this together, but they were very much interested in their own companies and beating each other. They always looked at each other as competition. And so it caused the first 4 or 5 years were very intense, actually. I mean, it was a very intense introduction to any business or any sort of field. But I don't know. I was abreast and involved in things. I was on that AMC thing that Kirkman just did. I was actually portrayed by an actor in there. There was a scene where myself and Rob Liefeld, and I was dramatized by someone, some random actor. I actually haven't even seen it, but I was dramatized by an actor, because there was an Image partner meeting in 1994 when Rob was starting to have a falling out with some of the other partners, where Rob had his suite right next to the suite where the Image partners meeting was going to be. So Rob and I were sitting in the next room next to the door. You know how there are those connecting doors between hotel rooms?
Right.
Rob and I were, with our ears listening to those guys talk shit. It was kind of fun. And that actually made it into that Robert Kirkman AMC comic.
I see Edward Norton. I would cast Edward Norton as
Yeah, I've heard that. Back when I was a little fitter, people used to say Christian Bale, but I get Ed Norton a lot.
I can see that too. I can see that. You mentioned Marc Silvestri. What's it like working with him?
Marc is probably one of the most chill people I've ever met in my life. You'd be surprised when you realize he's this Hall of Fame sort of legendary comic artist, because he's such a chill personality. You know what I mean? And And he is a perfectionist, and I'd say that is probably why Top Cow has succeeded as long and as well as it has. His perfection in art and the projects that he's wanted to work on. sometimes it slows things up a little bit, but that's kind of, that happens. And, like I said, what are we at? Almost 30 freaking years. God, man, I'm going to be 51 in like 2 weeks. It feels old, I mean,
yeah.
when I think about that, it's kind of weird. I don't feel like I look old yet. I don't know.
No, you look pretty good for that. So I turned 40 next week. So I'm like, so I get it. I'm leaving my 30s. It's my last couple days in my 30s, and so I understand. I get it.
Somewhere in your 20s. At some point in your 20s, you go from Christian Bale to Edward Norton. That's the natural progression.
Yeah, it's crazy. But man, those early Image days were wild. And I think the thing that people don't really understand is that none of us knew what we were doing. None of us knew anything of what we were doing. But there was so much demand for what we were doing that we were able to fuck up all the time and still succeed. And it's hard to explain to anyone that at all. But that's in essence what happened. I mean, one of the first books I ever wrote was Lady Pendragon. That first issue through Maximum Press sold like 400,000 copies, and I don't know that I've sold a first run 32-page comic book that's sold that many units since then that was paid for.
Right.
I mean, I've done a couple million plus custom comic deals, like when I did the one for God, what's that video game? Not Tales of Honor, but the other one, Warframe. They did that in the multi-millions. There's a lot of these custom comics. People don't really pay too much attention to those, but there's a lot of those that come out that are printed and distributed in the multi-millions and millions of numbers. It's kind of fascinating. So
nice.
But there's so much in this history of Image and Top Cow, and Mike Turner was my son's godfather. I mean, there's a lot of internecine stuff going on in this industry, and the thing is, it's a very small industry too. I mean, I tell people this all the time: is how many American writers do you think there are writing comics in English?
That's right.
There's maybe 200 or 300. That's it.
Yeah.
There's like 800. There's 800 people that play in the NFL.
That's right.
Think about that.
Wow.
Wow. When you think about, there's a third as many people writing comic books in North American English than there are playing in the NFL or the NBA or and so it's fascinating to me. There's a lot of opportunity for young, smart people today, but it's all in crowdfunding and webcomics. Everything's changed.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So you mentioned the brilliant late Michael Turner. Can you tell us a little bit more about working with him? My next question was going to be, how did you first get involved with Top Cow? And I do want to hear about that, but I also want to hear about Michael Turner.
Well, and this goes to the weirdness of Image and Top Cow and all these sort of things, because the very first conversation I ever had with Marc Silvestri was him screaming at me for trying to hire Mike Turner. And that was the first conversation I've ever had with this guy. And he's like my partner, my boss for the last 22 years. We get along very well, So, but no, Mike, when he did Witchblade, he was a smart guy. He realized his star had risen. He knew he had a payday coming. He was a smart, savvy business guy, so he started shopping around Marvel, DC, Wildstorm, Extreme, looking to see what kind of deal he could get. And his sort of thought process was, I'm going to get the best deal I can from someone else and see if Top Cow will match it, because I'd rather stay at Top Cow, and but I want to get the best deal that I can. So this is what in essence he did. But by doing that, we drove up Top Cow's costs, and and that kind of stuff is never appreciated. Right. Especially when you're supposed to be in the same company, you know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, so Mike and I were friends. I think when I came on Top Cow, it was 4 years before Aspen split off, so I had almost 4 years. And if you remember, Mike and Vince and Frank Mastamaro, the Aspen guys, were the ones that did most of the touring. Like, if you go back and look at early Top Cow and look at who's doing the conventions, who's doing the signings, with the exception of the big ones like San Diego.
It's always Frank.
It was always Frank, me, and Mike. If you look at who went to these shows, it was the three of us. We were always traveling together, Pittsburgh, all these shows. So, we got to be really tight together, hanging out on the road. And, then he got cancer, which was kind of crazy. I'll never forget when he came into the bullpen and he said his hip hurt. He was out mountain biking with Brandon Peterson, and his hip started hurting. He came back to the studio, said, I got this pain in my hip. I've never felt this before, so I'm going to have to go get it checked out. And he was diagnosed with cancer. He died 7 years later.
Damn.
So
Damn.
it's It's weird. I mean, he was younger. I mean, he's a year and a half younger than me, you know, and so that's one of those weird things. And that's when, honestly, you know, we haven't gotten into the COVID pandemic and all this crazy thought, but that became real to me when a friend of mine who's only 54, you know, I know 54 sounds old, but when you're 50, almost 51, 54 doesn't sound that old anymore, you know?
Yeah, no kidding.
This guy I know that was 54, he got coronavirus and died. And I was like, oh, shit, this is real.
Yeah. Shit.
That's when it became real for me, because I was never one of these anti-mask guys, because, you know, I have a science background. I was intended to be a physics guy, and that never happened for me. But that was the career I had that never happened based on my education. I have a master's in physics.
Oh, wow.
I never used for anything. So, other than writing comics like the clock. So, but I don't know. There's so many stories. I go on for hours and hours and hours. I don't know if there's anything specific you want to hear about or talk about.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I've met Frank Mastromo before because he comes to the Hawaii Comic-Con. I've seen him here a few times. Super nice guy. Super enthusiastic. So going back to when you first got involved with Top Cow, how did the idea of Top Cow form, and how did you become involved?
Well, Top Cow initially was formed with Silvestri when he did Cyberforce, because Mark was originally part of Homage Comics, which was Jim and Mark together, and Will. So the three of them shared Homage Studios. When Jim created Wildstorm to have his own thing, Will became part of Wildstorm, and then Mark created Top Cow, and then moved from San Diego to Santa Monica, which is where those two kind of split apart. I think Jim always wanted Mark under his wing, and it didn't sort of work out that way in the long term because Mark had his own plans. The company became Top Cow as a joke. They wanted to. I wasn't there, but this is what I've heard. Top Dog was originally what they wanted to call it, but they couldn't get the trademark. Somebody made a joke about Top Cow. They kept it as a temporary name, and they were gonna change it at one point to Ballistic Studios. And then some woman sent in a random submission for the Top Cow logo with the lightning bolt and the udders. This is years before I was there, and everyone in the studio fell in love with this thing, and it became Top Cow, and it's been Top Cow for almost 30 years now. So
that's awesome.
That's the genesis of the name, you know, and where it came from. Well, I came from Top Cow. I was at Wizard World Chicago, 1998, and my booth, my image booth, not my Top Cow or Extreme booth, my image booth for me, was right next to Top Cow's booth, and so I spent that weekend kind of interfacing with those guys, and they could see that I was doing really well. And by the end of that show, they came up and asked me if I'd be interested in taking over the publishing division at Top Cow. And I was like, what? You know, and the thing was I was about 6 months at that point from getting married to my first wife. And it's weird. Believe me, it's weird when I think of historical context. I'm like, okay, that was my first wife. And that was my second wife. And, you know, I'm working on the third. When you get past a certain era, it's women and animals. That's how you remember where the fuck you were.
Milestones,
in life, you know?
Yeah.
I had this dog, and I was with this woman. Oh yeah, that's where I was.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
So they offered you to be in charge of publishing at
Top Cow. And Wizard World Chicago. That was, and then I was about to get married, so the idea of not being purely freelance and having a job in healthcare sounded really nice to me.
Right.
So I took the job, and I've been there for 22 years.
Dang, that's awesome. Did you think?
It's amazing how time flies.
Did you have any idea when you got to that point that you would have Top Cow where it is now?
No, not really. I mean, it's interesting because Top Cow's had sort of wild ups and downs and swings in popularity and for various different reasons. And part of that was a tactical shift away from pursuing pure collectibility and sort of that Bad Girls 90s model, which still does very well. And we see a lot of sort of retro Kickstarters and stuff like that. We're not opposed to that kind of stuff, but I think what we did tactically about 10, 15 years ago was where we realized that the long-term value in building a fan base is not in collectability, but in readership. So we sort of made the tactical shift to doing more books that are more reader-based. It's where the whole Sunstone line came from, was swaying in those books that are read by middle-aged women. There's, you know, the Edenverse line is much more reader-driven. We still have the core Top Cow universe, which we're going to be doing a lot more stuff with. But, you know, the thing is with you know, here's the thing with comic book readers. You know, if you get a reader, someone who likes your work, they like you, you got a fan for life. You know, I mean, and you can build a fan one at a time at these conventions or online or wherever you can, and you can build a nice fan base that way. And what people don't realize is in comics, all you really need is somewhere between 10 and 15,000 people that read your stuff, and you can live a very good living.
That's right.
You know, if you look at these $200,000 or $300,000 Kickstarters like a Brian Pulido, or look at the one that we just did for the Darkness, which was what, like 140 or something like that. There's only 1,200 backers. Okay, you don't look at the number. Look at the number, obviously, but also look at the number of backers. You know, if someone has 200 backers versus 2,000 backers, that's a massive difference. You know, and that is your loyal readership that you figure out how to monetize. And once you have
and keep happy, yeah,
yeah, you know, and that's the weird thing for me is I have a larger readership for that slice of life romance stuff now than I do for my science fiction stuff. It's very. Very weird.
Huh.
When I get described as romance writer Matt Hawkins, I'm like, what the fuck world am I living in?
Okay, I'll take it.
I haven't read the romance stuff yet, but I was perusing it, and it looks very sexy. It is sexy.
It is definitely adult content, you know, and it came from, and it scared me initially. And Sunstone was by the Sedgwick. Sedgwick, who was doing Aphrodite 9 that I was writing, he was doing the art. I'd worked with his wife on a number of projects, and he had done like 70 issues of Witchblade, and he was doing this webcomic on DeviantArt called Sunstone, and he asked me if we'd put it in print, and then I looked at it, and there were these two lesbian girls having sex, and they were showing it. I'm like, yeah, I don't think we'll be putting this out. And he's like, no, you don't understand. This has a massive audience, and it's all these women. And so I finally sat down and read the thing and realized, okay, this is not what I thought it was. People look at stuff like that and they think Skinamax, you know, or some stupid After Dark movie, but these are complex relationships.
All right. Well, moving into Think Tank, I was kind of excited to read that one. Sometimes, so Judah and I were both military dudes, so it's kind of hard to read stuff about the military without, you know, looking through that lens of like, all right, am I gonna have to turn my brain off here? Your book tackles the military-industrial complex, and oddly specific at that. What is oddly accurate? I would say unusually accurate. What kind of research did you do for that? Like even like the battery names, which we're pretty familiar with. Where I was like, BA-22. Oh wow. So what did you do for this book?
The one nice thing is I grew up on military bases. My dad actually was an Air Force engineer. He worked on the planes. He was a missile man, and he actually developed a program called the ICBM missile train that he ran for about 4 years before the subs came out and mothballed the idea. The quick idea, and most people don't realize this, is from like 1977 to 1980, 81, whenever the first sub came out. We had trains crisscrossing this country with nukes on them because we didn't want the Soviets to know where all our hard target missile silos were, because they knew where all our hard target silos were. But we wanted to have several nukes cruising around that they couldn't target or identify. So we had, you know, nukes traveling through rural areas pretty much 24/7.
No big deal. No big deal.
Yeah. You feel safe. You know, there was a train derailment in North Carolina that my dad refers to sometimes, which even still to this day, if you Google it, it comes up like some sort of chemical spill. And it was one of their Broken Arrow train derailments.
Wow. Yep. Broken Arrow.
But, so I lived in Ramstein. I lived over in Guam, Vandenberg. Grew up in Whiteman Air Force Base. So I grew up with a lot of these people. My sister was also an Annapolis graduate and went on to be an aeronautical engineer for the Navy. Ironically, I'm sort of the black sheep dumbass of the family, which you know, I make comic books. So.
Right. Now, did you tap into this? So you're saying that you're related to them, but when you're writing this, is this knowledge you already had, or did you like reach out to them and be like, hey, I'm trying to make this as accurate as possible?
Both. Okay. Both. I have a network of people that I use, and a lot of the people, because like I said, in the physics program at UCLA that I was in, there are a lot of people that are now in their late 40s and 50s that were my, you know, fraternity brothers and shit like that are in pretty serious jobs around the country. You know, like one of my guys runs the entire robotics division at Lockheed over here in El Segundo, and I have beers with this guy all the time. And it's just funny, we talk about stuff that is completely inappropriate, but you know, I've known the guy for 30 some years.
Right.
And so I mean, the fun stuff is going into these offices. Like if you ever get a chance to tour Lockheed, even the public part in El Segundo, it is like walking into the future. It is really strange. And because the way the doors work, the lights work, and everything, it is like in those sort of Minority Report movies where you have everything is synced up. It's like super Alexa, or whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah.
But
Awesome.
So yeah, no, I meticulously researched all that stuff.
Nice.
So you would say, like, like movies like Transformers, they are, some whatever movies, they'll hire like a military consultant or someone to be out there like, hey, that's not how that dude wears his, that's not how he should wear his fucking hat or shit like that, but like on a more technical level. Is that kind of what those family members and friends are to you now when you're writing?
Yeah, for the most part, I'll fire him an email, say, hey, I have a buddy that works for, used to work for Monsanto. I don't even know what they're called now. And I asked him, I said, is there a way to distribute something through food that would cause someone to be more susceptible to cancer in a very short period of time? And he's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, okay, there's my story.
Yeah, there it is.
That's over the answer that I would have expected. Like maybe like a, I guess it's possible, but oh fuck yeah, dude, we can give the whole world cancer.
That's interesting.
Most of the stuff that I'm reporting is not even really what do you call it, top secret anymore. See, the thing is, like, the sad thing is, even the state of the art stuff I was showing in Think Tank was still 5 or 10 years old, and that's the thing people don't realize,
Yeah. So there is a gas that'll tell you. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I guess
the truth gas.
So Robo and I work pretty closely with without talking too much about it, we work very closely with the military-industrial complex. Especially like UAS systems, like you have in your book, and stuff like that. And I guess the question I have is, what are your views on that? Like, how did what you feel about it translate to the story?
Well, I think the story for me was more centralized on how the scientists interact with the community than anything. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of a story that has not really been told, because we sort of know the story of the Manhattan Projects, but we really don't, Mm-hmm. And you look at like Feinstein, I think is a much more valuable person in that project than, Oppenheimer, or any of these other guys. And yet those are the names we know. And why is that? Because those are the guys that played ball.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's
right. Oppenheimer was a company man, so he got the credit. But Feynman and some of these other guys were much more involved in developing and doing it out. But here's the thing with the scientists that people don't realize. And this is why I did it in the book the way I did it. The science fairs around this country are run by the military-industrial complex, and they are specifically used to find and identify super smart and intelligent kids that they can suck into the military-industrial complex as scientists and become part of the system. And they do this in very insidious ways because they know these kids are ostracized and different. So what they do is they pull them into internships, get them into college programs, where they put them around people that are more like themselves. And one of the biggest complaints you have from these geniuses in high school chemist programs and stuff like that is that the equipment they're working with sucks. So if you're working with a kid that's a genius, guy, girl, what doesn't matter. They come in and they grab these kids, they take them to high-tech facilities, they put them around like-minded people, and suddenly these people are in heaven. For the first time in their lives, they're not treated like a leper. Mm-hmm. They're like the norm, because it's like almost... Big Bang Theory is one of those shows that makes me laugh here and there, but it's pretty fucking stupid. There's some stuff in there that's interesting, but for the most part, that is not how that works at all. So
I hate the Big Bang Theory.
That's one of those ones that, it really irritates me because it makes this process look a lot different than what it actually is. Right.
Mine's on a much more less intellectual level. Why I just find it not funny, and the jokes they try to pass. But anyways, yours is a better reason.
Yeah. Fair enough. But those people that I go to for research, often sometimes I'll have super specific questions. Like, what is the name of this battery? And I knew I wanted to use it as part of the thing, and that I actually had to ask someone, and they sent me a link to something, and I tracked it down. And that for me sometimes is some of the fun of it. It's funny that you mentioned that because of the battery and the way I use the super battery for the
mind reading thing.
Mind reading.
Uh-huh.
The power thing, those power requirements.
Yeah.
And that's I talk to my engineer buddies and they talk about it in the field and they say, and that's one of those things I wrote about with like versus how something works in the lab versus how it is field tested. And they tell me all the time they're always shocked at how things just do not work the same way at all, and it's always something they'd never considered.
That
insects flying into it,
That's right. No, exactly right. I would say out of all the stuff that I read, there was some stuff that's cool. So it's cool to not see afterburners on a UAV, a Predator type. It's cool to not see a AC-130 in a diving forward firing shooting configuration tactics. So those are good to not see. But I think people, as you know, we've only been at war like 20 years now, so it's cool to say we just turn on the news and you'll get some accurate information. But when you started getting into power requirements and then the BA-2290 and all that stuff, that's literally where I was like, oh my God, this is this dude like? Because that's literally what we like I said, we don't care to talk about what we actually do, but how things work in the field and power requirements and putting it on our kit, and then when you're sitting, putting everything together, everything works. All right, let's go do our training. And nothing works right because now we're talking about RF stuff. So that was pretty cool. So less technical. The main character, I apologize for forgetting his name, but the main character is seen playing a video game in one of the panels. And I don't know why it was. I zoomed in. I'm like, what is that? And I like, it looks familiar. And then I put it on. There's a YouTuber I follow named Blurred Without Fear. And I put it in his Discord in the video game room. Like, is this a real game? And then it was like some Sherlock Holmes level stuff. Like, well, I searched here, blah, blah, blah. Blurred Without Fear, Ernie's his name. He actually called it right away. So that's Darkness, that game. Yeah.
So,
No, go ahead.
Yeah, going to talk a little bit about the clock.
Okay.
Maybe a lot bit about the clock. With Colleen Doran, is it Duran or Doran? I think it's Doran.
I think it's Doran, but I hear it both ways, but I'm pretty sure she's Doran. I call her Colleen Doran.
Colleen Doran, yeah, she's awesome. Yeah. She's done a lot of great stuff, and her work here is really spot on, I think. So the clock, it would be an understatement to say that it seems maybe a little bit timely.
So weird.
Yeah. And you obviously. It's almost like you hit the. I don't want to say the jackpot because that implies that it's like good. It's good that, it's just a very. It's serendipitous, maybe. It's a huge coincidence.
Right.
But you conceived of the idea before the coronavirus pandemic even happened.
Years ago.
Yeah, years ago. So here's my question: have the current events related to the coronavirus reframed how you look at this story, and maybe if you were to write it again after having almost like a real world case study, would you have written anything differently?
Well, that is an awesome question, and the reason is because yes, I actually would rewrite certain things, because the one fascinating thing that I had not counted on was the bipolarization of our society, the way it's sort of evolved, and incorporating that into the storyline. And whichever side of the political spectrum you fall on, I tend to stay out of this unless people specifically ask me. But
we're about to ask you.
Whatever side of that political, I'm definitely left of center. I'm a Hollywood liberal. Come on, So I live in California. It doesn't matter who I vote for, right? Biden's going to win out here. If you live in Texas, Trump's going to win there.
Sure.
Sometimes I'm not in a state that matters to the equation.
Right.
My parents were evangelical Christians. I was actually raised Republican, and so
Same.
I wouldn't say I'm a liberal, but I'm certainly a moderate, slightly left of center.
Sure.
So,
all right, cool. So, that kind of goes right into my next question. So, in the clock, it seems that you're saying, that capitalism makes most global problems worse. And does your, you kind of answered it, but does your left of center viewpoints, did that inform your work for this, for the clock? Or is it just a story?
I don't think so, because I don't think I frame myself in political, where I think about that. I sort of look at these situations. This is where people that are on whatever side of the political spectrum don't like talking to me, because I may not agree with them despite us agreeing on other things.
Sure.
Because I've used, one of the things I did at a very young age when I was in debate class was we were preparing for this debate final, and this will make sense in a second. And I was a young Christian kid, and I was debating pro-life. And at the day before I was supposed to go debate pro-life with this woman, they flipped it on us and said, "Okay, Matt, you're going to debate pro-choice, and she's going to debate pro-life." And I was flustered, because I was this kid who'd grown up my whole life being an evangelical Christian, and all this sort of stuff. And then here I am prepared for this, savage showdown and debate. And now I had to argue the devil side, So I'm a complete atheist, by the way, now. So my life journey has been completely crazy. But the point of that is I
feel like we have a lot in
we've
common.
Lost critical thinking and free thinking. I feel like we've lost critical free thinking in this country, where people can't look at a situation and think for themselves about what it is. And I think the point I was trying to make about bipolarization, which I think had more fun with than my story, which tailors back to the point of what I was telling you all this about. I would have created a more fictional reality and shown the split. It might have been fun to show the two different spectrums on the political side and how they would frame these events. I did not do that. I framed it kind of like Contagion did, where it was all very scientific, it was all matter of fact, and it was all assuming that everyone was going to do this the best possible way,
right,
with the best possible intentions,
Mm-hmm.
and not to try to put any stumbling blocks or use it for political gain,
Right,
And
right.
I can recognize that both sides of the fence have done all those fucking things. So,
Mm-hmm.
It could be fun as a writer to play with that, and I did not have that luxury because at the time we didn't live in that world.
That's right.
Not yet.
That's right.
So after kind of witnessing I think the thing that has been most striking to me about how I guess the country has responded to the coronavirus, and it should have been obvious. I should have seen it coming, but the conspiracy theories, just like the willingness and eagerness to completely dismiss the Occam's razor and go for the most absurd conspiracy theories.
It's a pandemic, bro.
Pandemic, yeah. So, sorry. So after seeing all that, in response to COVID, do you feel in any way like maybe less inclined to utilize that in fiction, or I don't know?
That's a really good question. I think if I was going to use it, I would use it ironically to where the people that were fictionalizing it would cause them their own demise. You know what I mean? That's probably the way I would phrase it, because I would use it to where the people that were doing it with ill intent, they would pay a price for that. There's one thing I learned so long ago from studying Druidic cultures, and they have this thing, and it's in almost every early Gaian or religious culture that leads into Judeo-Christianity, is about this idea that what you put out there, you get back. And in many cases, you get back it in a multiplied factor. Most Wiccan cultures believe that there's a factor of 3. So if you put out there good energy, you're going to get good energy back to you 3 times. The idea of karma and all that, I'd like to believe in that. There's too many things I've seen in this life that make me not believe in that, but I choose to believe in it, even though it's probably not real, because a lot of people believe in a lot of crazy shit. Why not?
Sure.
So
that makes sense.
And but you went real quick before we, because we're gonna move on to some other subjects. But when does the trade for the clock come out?
It's mid-October.
Mid-October.
Mid-October. It's either the 7th or the 15th. I don't remember which one it is off the top of my head, but it's very soon. It's gone out. We have it to press. If people want it for review purposes, I can have Henry send you a PDF.
That'd be awesome.
Ooh.
That would be awesome.
Ooh,
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
So talking about you as an individual, you kind of answered this already, but it actually just created more questions in my mind real time. You said you didn't grow up reading comic books, and so
No.
your origin story. Tell me how you go from going to school for engineering, getting a degree in physics, science-based stuff, to working for Top Cow. Like, how does that transition happen? How are you discovered?
Well, it happened because I was working at a bank while I was going through my master's program. So all of it happened while I was still in school. I was working a retail banking job just to pay my bills. And if you've ever worked retail banking, it is one of the most god-awful jobs on the planet.
Sounds terrible.
And I was essentially a clerk. The people you go up and yell at for not counting out the change right or whatever. That's what I was doing. Pay my
Golly, yeah.
And so I was doing this job. I did not like it, and I was working full-time. I was in the lab 20-30 hours a week, and I had another 30-40 hours of lecture time. And so I was not enjoying life. And my nephew, who's 13 years younger than me, asked me if I would take him to the opening of Mile High Comics in Anaheim because Rob Liefeld was signing there. And I'm like, who's that? I had no idea who Rob Liefeld was.
Uh-huh.
So I took my nephew to that signing. We went at the time the signing started, and back then these guys got insane lines. It was a 3-hour line, and it was just one of those serendipitous weird things. It was on a Saturday. The 3 guys right in front of me were, I think Cedric Nocon. I'm saying this because these are all artists in the comic industry now. There were 3 guys who are all artists in the comic industry right now who are in front of me in this line. And so for 3 hours, I was talking to them and my nephew about this comic industry because I'm like, why the fuck are all these people queued up on a Saturday for this goddamn signing? You know? And so I got this 3 hour, and they were so excited and telling me about Image Comics and Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane. And so I got this education about comics and all this sort of stuff. And 3 hours later, I saw these 3 guys show their art to Rob, and he hired them on the spot. And I just happened to be the next guy, and it was just such a weird thing because I was just the next guy. I just spent 3 hours talking to these guys. They were so excited. I came around this corner here with these 6 or 7 young, good-looking guys. They had 6 or 7 good-looking girls with them. I'm like, fuck, that looks like a better life
than your retail banking. Yeah.
So I still, this is one of those weird things in life because it's changed everything in my life, who I married and where I lived and what I did. But yeah, so Rob said, I said, I'm not, I can't draw comics, but do you need anyone for anything else? He's like, well, we need someone to write press releases and do letters pages. Is that something you could do? I'm like, yeah. He's like, gave me his card. He's like, give me a call tomorrow. And I'm like, okay. And
awesome.
I noticed that there was a fax machine on the card. So I went to, I remember there was a bookstore down the street. I went down the street, bought a book called How to Write a Press Release. That's literally what it was called. And I wrote a press release as if I was going to send it out to the local media for the signing he had just done that I went to. And I faxed it to him. And I went in the next day and he hired me. So, and,
wow.
And that was, fucker. Sorry. That was 30 years ago. 30 years ago almost.
That's amazing.
That's one of my favorite how I got into comic stories. I have to say that is fucking awesome.
It's weird because it's so bizarre.
That's the American dream. That's the American dream. Is just like opportunity. That's pretty dope.
What you've now done is prompted Judah to any line he ever stands in for anybody signing, he's gonna go up to them and ask for a job.
Ask for a job.
Yeah. He's like, can I do anything? Can I make your coffee? Anything at all.
Hey Matt, you need anything? Anything at all?
No, man. What do you want me to sign? Can you get out of the line?
So you've seen so this is kind of like a speculative question. Looking for your kind of your perspective on it. You've seen the medium evolve over the years. What do you predict comics are going to look like in the future? You mentioned earlier it's going to be digital. It's going to be a lot of Kickstarter type stuff. Let's skip ahead 10 years. What do comics look like?
I think there will always be some form of print, and I think, but you're going to see print as being more like high-end hardcover. Because we've already seen a push for this. People want printed products that they can get autographed or get a sketch on. They want a premium hardcover, a nice product if they're going to have it sitting on their shelf. They either want that or they want something that's extremely reader-friendly, cost-friendly. And it's one or the other. The 32-page collectibility of comics has really been on the wane for almost 30 years. It was almost at its peak when I started, and it's been declining ever since. I'm not saying it's going to go away, but it's been declining the entire time I've been in the industry. And I think that's something people need to realize, is that collectors and the readers are not always the same. There are readers that are collectors, but there are definitely collectors who are not readers, and there are definitely readers who are not collectors. And you need to be able to identify who you're marketing what to and why, and price appropriately. Because that's the business side that so many people fail to think about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We need more, how people find new content, especially in a post-COVID world where I'm wondering how conventions are going to be, kind of fascinates me, because I've built my personal audience by shaking their hands and meeting them at conventions over the last 30 years, and that sort of cemented me where I'm probably going to be fine for the rest of my career. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, that's not what anyone else wants to hear, because I can sell direct or run Kickstarters. And Mark and I have been talking about this a lot. We want to support the direct market because it's what built us and made us. But, the direct market is not what it was. I mean, it used to be 90+% of our business, and now it's well under 40, And I understand the comments. I think this is the problem with Marvel and DC and some of the bigger companies too. Is the direct market is a much smaller percentage of their business than it used to be, and so you have the bean counters who don't have any loyalty to the industry, whether they're coming in from outside mergers or whatever it is. They're just looking at this as basic numbers and just making decisions.
Makes sense. That makes sense. So, Image has imprints like Top Cow, Skybound, Todd McFarlane productions, and all that. How does the creator-owned dynamic work within those imprints? Like, so obviously, if someone like Ron Mars writes an established Top Cow character like Witchblade, he doesn't own what he's writing at that point. How does that jive with the whole creator-owned ethos of Image's founding principles?
Well, it's kind of the same one half of the other way I look at it. I mean, we still do creator-owned, and if you create your own stuff, you own it, you know. But if you want to write and get paid a page rate to write a company character, you can do it. We're certainly not forcing anyone to do it, and people know what they're getting paid and they know what they're getting into. So, I mean, I'm all for creator rights and creator friendliness, but it's a difference when you're looking at a comic book like Spawn or Witchblade or The Darkness that's been around for 30 plus years and has become somewhat iconic in the culture. You know, I mean, more people know the Darkness video game than they know the Darkness comic, even though the Darkness comic preceded it. These are all good questions, and I think here's the one thing that I think that Top Cow and small business people have an advantage of in this market is we can pivot very quickly. Marvel and DC and the bigger companies cannot pivot very quickly, and I think that has given us an advantage. And I think if everyone is smaller like us, is smart, pays attention to the opportunities on the ground, there's always something going on. It's got to strike when it's the right time.
Awesome.
Cool. So, this is looking for your opinion. What is the greatest comic book of all time?
Wow.
No pressure or anything, you know.
Well, I'm going to say what is the greatest comic book of all time to me
go.
To my personal taste, and has had the most impact on my career, and that would be Watchmen. And I do not think that is probably the greatest comic book of all time. However, it had the most impact on me because when I first got into Image and started reading some of the comics, they were not reader friendly. They were art friendly, and some of them, you know, I go back and look at some of the early books, they were pretty stupid, you know. and so I was editing books that I didn't particularly like, you know what I mean? And then suddenly there was Maximum Press, and I was editing Alan Moore, and I read V for Vendetta, and I'm like, I didn't even know who Alan Moore was when I was told I was going to be his editor. And so I'm on the phone with this legendary guy. I didn't know who the fuck he was. You know, the first 2 or 3 years of my career are weird because I met Kirby, I met Stan Lee. I knew who Stan Lee was. I mean, all these people were in the office hanging out pretty regularly. You know, Walt Simonson. You know, I didn't know who any of these people were. And it's funny, in a weird way, I think it was probably good for me in my career because I truthfully didn't give a shit who they were. They felt more comfortable around me. You know what I mean?
Right, because you weren't like me and Robo, where we would be like salivating, like, oh, Alan Moore.
Yeah. But Alan taught me, working with him and reading his books, that the comic books are for everyone, and I believe that, which is why I don't write my books for children. You know, you read anything I write, you can tell I'm not writing it for an 8-year-old.
Sure.
And I like that we have this medium that's as flexible as novels and films, and I think we should exploit it better, and I think we all are.
Awesome.
I agree.
So speaking of film, so same question, but for film. What's your favorite movie of all time?
Oh wow, these are questions that oddly have evolved over the years.
Yeah.
You know, if you'd asked me this 15 years ago, my reflex would have been immediately Empire Strikes Back. I would have said that immediately without hesitation, and
Solid.
I would have fought for that from now and then. But Star Wars is so faded in my brain because of all the nonsense they put out over the last 20 years. There's some good stuff. Mandalorian was good. There's some stuff in some of the films I thought was good, but overall, pretty much they've done a bad job in my opinion. But you know, I don't think they care what I think. I'm not in that prime 18 to 50 demographic anymore. I realized that the other day. I'm like, oh, film studios don't give a fuck what I think anymore.
Yes, that's true. So has anybody?
They're making those movies for Christian Bale types, not Edward Norton types.
Stupid.
That hurts.
So has anything taken the #1 spot for you then?
You know, there's movie. Honestly, a movie like Shawshank Redemption, for some reason, just that every time I watch that movie, it just kind of moves me. You know what I mean?
Powerful,
and
yeah.
I see The Empire Strikes Back, and it gives me the excitement of a child. But a movie like Shawshank, where I watched that, or even even a movie like Requiem for a Dream, at that point when you have that guy and he realizes his girlfriend's off banging that other guy, and then he takes the drugs and he's crying, and then the drug kicks in and he doesn't care. That's such a powerful, emotional, human escape moment.
Requiem fucked me up for sure.
It's a god awful movie. I hope I never want to watch again, but I try to watch it as many times as I can.
I was high when I watched it, so that was like it was the worst movie to watch high.
Oh,
damn.
I can't even imagine. But yeah, those are hard. You know, and I'm not trying to be coy or intellectual. I'm not one of these artist dudes. I'm perfectly fine watching the Michael Bay movies as long as I know I just turn my brain off and watch shit blow up. You know.
Right.
It's all about expectations for me. I think the last movie I saw that I knew nothing about that blew me away was actually this movie called The Arrival.
Oh yeah, yeah, good movie.
Redheaded girl.
Yes.
Yes.
Aliens.
And they draw. Yeah. They write in a circle with their
the octopus language thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it surprised me because I love that when you know nothing about something, you go into something completely cold.
Right.
And sometimes it's awesome, you know, and sometimes it's awful, like Aragon. Oh my god. Yes.
That's how I felt about Parasite. Like, I'm usually pretty big on movies and news and pop culture, and for some reason, Parasite just escaped me until I heard about the Oscars, and I literally started the movie. Like, okay, I gotta watch this, and I literally thought it was a Korean horror movie about zombies, and I probably watched the movie 20 minutes, and as I'm watching it in my head, I'm like, this is really gonna get sick right here, and and I'm like, still, this movie was great to me. I'm like, wow, I had no idea what this movie was about, so I get it.
So you've been on lockdown. I mean, we've all been on lockdown in various capacities throughout this pandemic. What have you been doing besides work to stay sane?
I play a lot of Elder Scrolls Online.
Yes,
I eat a lot of the food my son cooks, which he's a very good cook. I'm very thankful that I have my 18-year-old still here living at home.
Also,
nice.
I'm trying not to have my 3 cats drive me insane. I'm historically not a cat owner. I'm a dog guy. When my second wife and I split up, I inherited the cat. So
that's cool.
Yeah, I'm like, now I have three cats going. I had 2 dogs, and now I have 3 cats. So
hey, you know, she gets the house and the car. You get the cats. It's even. You know.
Yeah. I've been
too close to home.
A little bit. It depends on the month. Like part of it is okay. Was this March when this shit first started and everyone was kind of fucking around at home? Oh yeah, I was probably playing a little more video games then. Has it been in the last 2 months where I've really gotten productive and focused? Like what I've really been working on of late, and I'm really proud of, is this book about poaching I'm working on. And the research for that has been traumatizing, I have to say. Quite traumatizing to me personally. And it's one of the things I have the ability to do. And this is where I do get a lot of my research. I was one of the first people on the dark web. And that handle divinity on the dark web is mine. But people know that's me. I'm one of the few people that's not anonymous on the dark web. I do that for a reason, because I went on there and I basically told these people, I'm just a comic writer. I just want to get shit right. You know, just if you. So I did that, and I sent a lot of these guys free PDFs and links. Some of these guys have helped me out on a few things. Sometimes it's nice to have friends that are bad guys, you know. But
wow.
But it's been but getting on there sometimes when you deal with like poaching and illegal animal trade and stuff like that. I mean, that stuff is just makes you ashamed of your fellow man, you know. I mean, some
100%.
of the stuff that is done is just so horrible and horrifying. I mean, it's bad enough what we do to each other, let alone what we do to these poor little critters, you know.
Yeah.
That Blackfish movie. Did you ever see that Blackfish documentary about the orcas that were?
I'll have to watch that.
It's pretty disturbing.
It's about SeaWorld.
Yeah, it's. We should all be ashamed of what we do to Mother Nature, for sure.
And I say that as a meat eater. I'm not one of these crazy people. I'm all for, you know, fair and ethical treatment of animals and stuff like that. But some of it's just ridiculous, you know. And I even see, this is again for critical thinking. I mean, if you grow up in a country, this is where interesting thing I learned. One thing I'll throw out is the one thing I realized is why a lot of Asian countries in Southeast Asia are so, they don't seem to give a shit about how the treatment of these animals are. I finally realized that culturally they just see it as a natural resource. To them, it's no different than digging gold out of the ground. That's culturally how they see it in China and Vietnam, which is why it's different. Because we over here think of it as we think of there's Mr. Cow that we can eat, and there's Mr. Dog that we pet. And it's a weird line that a lot of countries don't understand. It's complicated issues. Very complicated. But those are the ones I love. I choose projects because I want to learn about them. That's why I do it. Because then the research is fun.
Makes me think of Michael Crichton, because he does a lot of that kind of did a lot of that deep dive research to prep for his stuff too. It's cool. Awesome.
I've actually I'm glad you picked that up, because I specifically patterned myself after him. When he passed away is when I did Think Tank. Actually, I had not done a project like that previously, and my initial thought is maybe there'll be a vacuum of hard sci-fi stuff coming out, and so I did several, and that's what got me into doing what I'm doing, was his death actually. So
cool.
All right, dope. So you always try to figure out how to word this. Top Cow, anything coming out that you're allowed to tell us that maybe you haven't told anybody else yet?
Oh, the glasses are on. Ready.
I don't think that we haven't announced anything that we aren't doing. I mean, I know Cedric has always announcing all of his various projects. We've already talked about that we're going to be doing new material with Witchblade and Darkness. We have not announced how or when or who or any of those things, but these things are all in development and in the works. So we're pretty excited about some of the stuff. I mean, we're coming up on the 30th anniversary of Cyberforce, so of course we're going to do something cool with that.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is Matt Hawkins. Matt, thank you for coming out and joining us and giving us a bit of your time.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So check them out. We'll put all the links to to get the comics that we talked about today with Think Tank and the clock and all that in the description, and to Top Cow's website. You guys take it easy, stay safe, and wear your mask. Wash your hands.
And watch our show because you want to and not because of the threats. Thank you for watching Judah, Robo, and Ree. We talk about comics, movies, and TV. Sometimes we have notable guests, and sometimes it's just us. But we're also cool.